Hello everyone, good afternoon, and hello Sir Chels, good afternoon. I am Archie Ango Soriano, a political science student. I am here to tackle about the political theory of Thomas Hobbes. So, before I proceed to the discussion of Thomas Hobbes' political theory, let me first introduce to you Thomas Hobbes. So Thomas Hobbes is a philosopher, a Western philosopher and a contemporary philosopher from 17th century, and he was born in England. And Thomas Hobbes' works emerged due to the situation in his society in his time, in which a political conflicts and civil war are ever emerging in his society. So Thomas Hobbes uh, invented a political structure that could somehow solve the problems that is recurring in his society. So, so Thomas Hobbes' political theory is all about um, establishing a civil society that has, in which this civil society that has a a government that has the supreme authority, power, and over its citizens to protect and preserve the liberty and freedoms of its people. Uh, it is also the main features also in Hobbes' political theory are the Leviathan. Uh, as I've said, a state with a supreme power to uphold and protect and preserve the liberty and freedom of its people. So now, in Hobbes' political theory, he established a civil society that that I have discussed earlier. But before I proceed to the discussion of civil society, it is important to understand that uh, in it, in that Hobbes, in his political theory, it is very important to understand the state of nature, because in a state of nature, before there was an organized laws, before there was an organized society, and before there was a government, the state of nature that Hobbes discusses in his political theory is that humans are brutish, solitary, poor, and short, meaning to say, people will always seek to dominate others. People will have to acquire more power to gain or to secure his uh, rights. People will always subjugate others and do whatever means necessary to protect, to secure and protect his or himself. But according to Hobbes, in a state of nature, security is very impossible. So for Hobbes, he believes that humans are not destined like this, and humans are made to realize that the the ever constant or for seeking power or for dominating others will lead him to death. So in other words, in a state of nature, in order to proceed, in order to jump in a civil society, from the state of nature to civil society, people uh, must will have to realize that in an ever quest for power will lead him to death. So the tendency here is that the fear of death and the desire to live comfortably will be the main ingredient to establish a civil society. In a civil society that Hobbes proposes, people has now the freedoms and liberty, but with a limitation and restrictions that Hobbes proposes. In a civil society, according to Hobbes, if a freedom without a limitation can lead back again to the state of nature in which a constant war and violence are occurring. So, in a civil society, there are freedoms but have limitations, and these limitations should be followed and upheld by the people in order to establish a civil society. So what do we mean about this? So what do we mean about these limitations that Hobbes establishes? These limitations are also called the civic virtues and the natural laws that should be followed by the people to uphold and to promote a civil society that Hobbes proposes. So, in a civil society with civic virtues and natural laws, people here are committed to peace and do not acquire more freedoms and respect the liberty of others. So, in other words, this is what Thomas Hobbes called the mutual respect. When we call the mutual respect, this is now a cooperative framework, a setting that people cooperate each others to protect its own liberties, and by doing this, a certain covenants and agreements should be that are being followed, or in short, people will have to do covenants and agreements to uphold to protect each and everyone's liberty and freedoms. But Hobbes, Hobbes is very doubtful about in this kind of setting, because for Hobbes, he really never cannot trust humans, especially in the state of nature, especially in the nature of human, because humans in core is very will always seek his interest. So in order these covenants and agreements be achieved, for Hobbes, in his civil society, uh, in order these agreements to be upheld and these covenants be followed, Hobbes proposes that there should be powerful states that should enforce and punish those who will not comply in the covenants and agreements between citizens. Uh, so so there should be a state that should enforce, a powerful state that should enforce and punish those who that will not comply the agreements and covenants between people. Here another civic virtue will emerge in a civil society is justice. How can be a just how in Hobbes' political theory, what is a just society? For Hobbes, a just society in his civil society is that one must uphold or follow the agreement with each other. So for Hobbes, justice is that when you follow the agreements with each other, it is a just society. And justice can only be possible if there is a state that will enforce, that compel the citizens to follow the agreements that that or to uphold their agreements. So pasabot ani, justice for just society will only be possible if there is a state that a very powerful state that will enforce and make and force to compel individuals to follow and uphold an agreements. So because of Thomas Hobbes really did not trust individuals will uphold agreements with each others. So Thomas Hobbes rely on the states. Thomas Hobbes rely on the states that it will be the main actor to 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 enforce and to justify a society. So for example, kung nakoy utang nya nagkasabot ang bayaran ako ni siya ugma, nagkasabot gyud, literal nga sabot, and wala ko ni, and because humans have this core of this kind of attitude that preserve personal interest, so wala ko ni, sunod sa akong agreement nga bubayad ugma. In order to prevent this kind of situation, para mahadlok ko, ay para to follow the agreements that we have agreed upon, a state, there should be a state, ang gobyerno mismo mag-impose og mga balaod para mahadlok ka to follow agreements. Ang state mismo ang will make sure na ikaw or ako will follow the agreements that we have agreed upon. So for Thomas Hobbes, justice, so as I said earlier, for Thomas Hobbes, justice is when people will uphold an agreements with each other, between with each other. So in other words, the state here is the main ingredient to achieve justice in his society. So if there is no state, no powerful state in this society, there can be no justice in his society. So it is very important that there should be a powerful state and a very powerful supreme state that will impose and enforce these laws and these agreements that people uphold. And another civic virtues that people should follow, or the natural laws that people should uphold in a civil society, is that people must uphold gratitude to others. So pasabot kung in a civil society, a people should uphold a gratitude to others. So kung ikaw tagaan ka o regalo sa imong imong isig ka tao, you should be thankful enough. Okay? If this gratitude naa sa ato, it will prevent people to think potential enemies with each other. So kung magpasalamaton ka, dili na ka magunahon nga kalaban animo siya. So if that mindset manggod, if that mindset will ever occur, it will lead to the state of nature that Hobbes discusses. And as I have discussed earlier, that people will look others as their enemies, potential aggressor, potential enemies to claim what is yours. And especially in a civil society, everyone should treat fairly. Justice is fairness, kumbaga pa kanjan roles. So for Thomas Hobbes, people must treat fairly to each and every one of us to establish a civil society. And so to sum up the civic virtues that Hobbes proposes in a civil society, civic virtues is freedom, justice, gratitude, and equity. In which, if these four can be followed in his political theory, a civil society can be possible. However, Hobbes did not really trust individual itself, because these four civic virtues can only be possible if there is a state, a very powerful state, that will enforce, that will and manage the society. So for Thomas Hobbes, he did not really trust the behavior of humans, because there is a really good chance that people will not uphold these civic virtues in a civil society. So there should be a state, because according to him, a covenant without a sword is a word. So pasabot, a state should have a sword to uphold the covenants, to uphold the civic virtues, to establish a civil society. So when we talk about the state should have a sword, uh, it is simply means that a state should have this full authority over its citizens in a manner of consent. So the people here now is that will give consent to the state or or the single man or especially in or an assembly to give all to give up all his rights and give consent to to the state in order to protect to preserve his liberty and freedoms. So pasabot ani, ako as a citizen, I will akong isurrender ang akong tanan na akong akong isalig sa imo tanan ang akong katungod para to secure and to preserve ma-preserve ang akong rights and akong liberty. So what does Hobbes means about this? And it is a matter of consent. People will give authority to the state. Kasi pasabot, what does Hobbes really means about this? So simply, people will give authority to a state or to a single person or to have a supreme power to govern and protect the basic right and especially upholds the freedoms in a society. In other words, the state has now the full sovereign over its citizens, and for Hobbes and for Hobbes' political theory, by the time the citizen gives authority to the state, there is no turning back, because when you give authority to the state, you cannot really turn it, and you cannot really claim it back, those rights that you have trusted in the state, because according to the Thomas Hobbes, a justice is when you uphold agreements with each and every one. So in this scenario, you have agreed upon in the state, but if you do not, if you have agreed in the state, you have made a covenant to the state, but if you claim it back, if you complain and claiming your trust to the society, then it is not justice as well, because as I said, by the time you give authority to the state, there are no turning back, because if you complain because of the wrongdoings of the state, if ever they commit a wrongdoing, you have no right to complain, you have no right to revolt, and in fact, as a matter of fact, it is your fault, I am the one to be blamed, because I am giving the state the trust, because I give the trust to the state, so I am the one giving the state the trust to preserve my rights, so I am the one to be blamed if the state is committing a wrongdoing. But for Thomas Hobbes, it is impossible that the state will commit wrongdoings, or because the state will uphold the civic virtues, will act to promote and preserve the rights of its citizens, and by and the state should act in accordance with the civic virtues that Hobbes proposes. So again, for Thomas Hobbes, he also argues that the best form of government that can implement this system that he proposes and he invented is monarchy, an absolute monarchy. And Hobbes also suggests that Hobbes in his political theory suggested that there should only be one national church in his society, and as well in which the state has the full sovereign in the church, and meaning to say that if the church will be uh, will be controlled by the state, and even the doctrines and the beliefs are being controlled by the states. So in Hobbes political theory, it is very noticeable that Hobbes really vested the power of the state, focuses the power of the state to be the sole actor, to be the actor, to be the to promote to promote a civil society, and to preserve the rights and liberty of its citizens. In other words, Thomas Hobbes promotes a unitary government, which power is vested only in one person, or in an assembly. And an example of this in our modern times are, we can look on the North Korea, because when we look in the political structure of the North Korea, the power vested only in one person, and in which in their in one person, and people do not have the right to revolt. Cannot People will have no right to complain. Well, if you just look at the political structure in the North Korea, and also if we uh, well there are only few absolute monarchies in our present times. The Saudi Arabia, well, it is an absolute monarchy. Also an example of this Thomas Hobbes proposed political structure, proposed civil society. So that is all, I think. I hope you understand. I hope I give a clear discussion about Thomas Hobbes' political theory. And thank you for watching, and um, stay, especially in these times, stay safe. Just a friendly reminder, that we have to follow safety protocols, minimum safety protocols that our government has imposed to prevent this pandemic that is occurring right now. So God bless everyone. Thank you.